Today, we are going to travel back in time to meet a woman whose words were stronger than weapons, whose courage was louder than fear, and whose story can teach us English and freedom at the same time. Her name was Emma Goldman. She was not a queen, not a soldier, not a famous actress, but her voice could shake the walls of power. Emma Goldman believed that words can wake sleeping hearts. She believed that freedom is not given. It is spoken. Many people feared her. Governments tried to silence her, but no one could stop her from speaking. In this story, dear listener, you will not only learn about her life, you will also learn English through her journey. You will listen, feel, and understand every moment, because this story will speak directly to your heart. We will learn new words. We will repeat sentences, and we will see how one woman's courage can help you speak English with confidence, emotion, and truth. So, take a deep breath. Imagine you are in a world where speaking truth was dangerous, and one woman stood up just to say, "If I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution." Chapter 1. The little girl from Kovnoshi was born in a small place called Kovno, now Kaunas in Lithuania. Her name was Emma Goldman. She was born on June 27, 1869. Note: Kovno is the old name of the city now called Kaunas. Emma grew up in a Jewish family. Her home was not easy. Her father was strict and used harsh punishments. Emma learned early that life could be hard. When she was a child, she talked and read quietly. She loved stories and books, but her home had little money. So, like many children of that time, Emma had to work when she was young. At about 13 years old, Emma left school and took a job in a factory. She sewed coats and dresses. She worked for many hours each day. She earned very little money. The work was boring and the factory was noisy. This life showed Emma how people who work hard can suffer when bosses do not care. These early days in the factory made her think deeply about fairness and work. When she was 16, Emma decided to go to America. She left Kovno and immigrated. Yulnas moved to another country to live, to the United States in 1885. She arrived with a sister. They entered the United States at Castle Garden in New York, a place where many immigrants arrived then. In America, Emma lived first in Rochester, New York, with her sister. She worked long days in clothing shops. She wanted more than the work. She wanted freedom. The freedom to read, to speak, and to think. While working, she met other people who felt the same. They talked about books and politics after long days at the factory. Emma also married once early in her life. She married a man named Jacob Kirschner in February 1887. The marriage was not happy. Jacob and Emma did not find the life they hoped for. They separated soon after. This difficult time pushed Emma to leave the small city life behind. She packed a small bag and left with only a few dollars and her sewing machine. She went to New York City to find a different life. In New York, Emma walked into a different world. She found crowded streets, many languages, and loud ideas. She met people who read newspapers, spoke about change, and planned meetings. Emma heard stories about workers in danger, about poor living places, about people who had no power. She met people who called themselves anarchists. Anarchist, Skrier, a person who believes governments are not needed or who criticizes authority, often wanting big changes. These people wanted a fair world where people were free and equal. At first, the word anarchist sounded strange and dangerous. But Emma listened. She saw a person speak with a strong voice. A man named Johann Most. and she felt a new fire inside. She felt that speaking and acting could change things. Chapter 2. The Radical Voice Awakens New York City. The year was 1889. The streets were full of noise. Horses, factories, voices in many languages. People from everywhere were trying to build a new life. Emma Goldman was one of them. She was only 20 years old, but inside her heart was a storm of questions. She had seen the factory pain, the long hours, the small pay. She had felt the silence of people who were afraid to speak. She knew something was wrong with the world around her. One day, Emma heard about a meeting in a hall in New York. A man named Johann Most was going to speak. He was a famous anarchist. Anarchist Shiu, someone who believes people can live free without unfair governments. Emma went to listen. The hall was full. Men and women sat close together on wooden chairs. When Most started to speak, his voice was loud and burning. He talked about the poor, about workers who died in factories, about the need for justice and change. He said that every human being has the right to live with dignity. Dignity, self-respect, and honor. Emma listened, and her heart beat faster. She felt as if someone was speaking the words she had kept inside for years. When the speech ended, she walked home through the cold streets of New York, but her mind was full of fire. She wanted to learn more. She started to read books about freedom, society, and workers. She went to more meetings. Soon she met another young speaker, Alexander Berkman. He was a Russian immigrant like her. They became close friends and shared dreams of a free world. Together they began to speak at public places. At first Emma was afraid. Her English was not perfect, her voice was small, but people listened. They felt her truth. They felt her passion. Soon, newspapers in New York began to talk about her. Some called her Red Emma because of her strong ideas. Red, symbol of radical change at that time. Emma learned that speaking was not just about words. It was about feeling. She said to herself, "If I speak with honesty and heart, people will listen, even if my English is not perfect." That is a lesson for you too, dear listener. When you speak English, do not fear mistakes. Speak with honesty. Speak with heart, because truth is stronger than grammar. As Emma and Berkman continued to speak, the world around them was also changing. In the year 1892, news came from a town called Homestead, Pennsylvania. A steel factory strike had turned violent. Workers were shot, families were crying, and the government stood with the rich. Emma and Berkman decided they could not just watch. They wanted to act, and this is where our next chapter begins. Love, action, and Homestead. The moment when Emma's words and life become one powerful story. Chapter 3. Love, action, and Homestead. The year was 1892. Emma Goldman was now living in New York with her closest friend, Alexander Berkman. They were both young, full of dreams, full of anger at injustice. They believed the world could be free, fair, and beautiful if people had courage to fight for it. But that year, something terrible happened in Homestead, Pennsylvania. Workers at the great Carnegie Steel Company had gone on strike. Strike when workers stop working to demand better pay or conditions. They were fighting for their rights. But the company's manager, Henry Clay Frick, brought armed guards to stop them. Violence broke out. Many workers were hurt. Some were killed. The newspapers were full of fear and anger. When Emma and Berkman read about it, they could not sleep. They felt that the world was blind to the pain of workers. They wanted to do something big, something that would make the world listen. Berkman decided to take revenge on Frick. He believed that one strong act could wake up the whole country. Emma did not plan the act, but she understood his feelings. She loved him deeply. Not like a calm love, but a love full of fire and purpose. They both believed that love and freedom must live together. One summer morning, Berkman traveled to Pittsburgh. He entered Frick's office and tried to attack him with a gun. Frick was wounded but survived. Berkman was arrested and sent to prison for 22 years. He served 14 years before being released. When Emma heard the news, her heart broke, but she didn't run away. She stood in public places, on street corners, and spoke for Berkman, for the workers, for freedom. Many people called her dangerous. Some newspapers painted her as a monster. But when she stood before people, her words were calm, her eyes were strong, and her English had become clear and powerful. She said, "The real violence is poverty, not protest." She was arrested for her speeches more than once. But even in jail, she smiled and said, "Prison cannot stop the truth." After Berkman's arrest, Emma continued to speak alone. She traveled to many cities, teaching people about freedom, love, and equality. Soon she began to write, not only speeches but full essays and even her own magazine. She believed that knowledge must reach everyone, not just the rich. Chapter 4. Mother Earth. The Voice of Free Minds. After Berkman was sent to prison, Emma Goldman stood alone, but not silent. She had lost her partner, her best friend, and yet something powerful was growing inside her. That power was her voice. She said once, "The most violent element in society is ignorance." So she decided to fight ignorance with education. She wanted workers, women, and youth to think, to question, and to dream. From 1893 onward, Emma began to travel all across America. She spoke in small rooms, parks, and union halls. She taught people about freedom, love, and truth, all in clear, strong English. She never shouted. She reasoned, and that made her dangerous, because her words could awaken sleeping minds. In 1901, something tragic happened again. President William McKinley was assassinated by a young man named Leon Czolgosz, who claimed he was inspired by anarchist ideas. The newspapers immediately blamed Emma Goldman, even though she had nothing to do with the act. She was arrested and questioned for weeks, but no evidence was ever found against her. She was innocent, yet this event changed her life once more. She realized that freedom needed a voice that could not be twisted by the press. So, in 1906, she founded her own magazine, Mother Earth. Mother Earth became one of the most powerful and independent publications in America. It printed essays, poems, and news about freedom, women's rights, art, and labor. Through this magazine, Emma gave a voice to the unheard. She wrote, "The aim of every true social change is the full development of human beings." People from all over the world read Mother Earth. It inspired students, workers, artists, and even future leaders of movements for justice. But her fight was not just on paper. She also spoke for women's right to control their own bodies, a subject no one dared to discuss in public. She said openly that women must have the freedom to choose if and when to become mothers. For this, she was arrested again and again. Each time she was taken to prison, she would come out stronger. She would say to her friends, "They can jail my body, but not my spirit." By 1910, Emma had become one of the most well-known speakers in America. Some loved her. Some feared her. But no one could ignore her. Her lectures filled large halls. Her English, once broken and shy, was now fluent, poetic, and powerful. It moved people to tears and to action. She once told her students, "Don't be afraid to speak. Every great idea was once a whisper, but the world was about to change again. A great storm was coming, World War I, and Emma Goldman, with her deep love for peace and humanity, could not stay silent while millions were sent to die. She stood up once more, not for one group, not for one nation, but for all mankind." Chapter 5. The War Against War. Emma Goldman and the Fight for Peace. When the world rushed into war in 1914, Emma Goldman watched with pain in her heart. She saw men leaving their homes, women crying at train stations, and children waving flags without knowing what war truly meant. She said softly, "Patriotism assumes that our globe is divided into little spots, each surrounded by an iron gate. Those who have had the fortune of being born on one particular spot think themselves better, nobler, and more virtuous than all others." To Emma, war was not glory. It was greed in disguise, rich men sending poor men to die. She called it the sacrifice of the living to the power of money and authority. When America entered World War I in 1917, Emma could not remain silent. She and her lifelong friend Alexander Berkman, who had been released from prison after 14 long years, stood together again. This time, they created a new movement called No Conscription League, a peaceful group that spoke against forcing men to join the army. Emma and Berkman went city to city, giving speeches that said, "No man should be forced to kill another against his conscience," inner moral voice. Her English was calm, logical, and full of emotion. She told crowds, "War will not bring peace. Only justice and understanding will." But America, at that moment, was full of fear and anger. The government passed new laws, the Espionage Act, 1917, and Sedition Act, 1918, which made it a crime to speak against the war. Still, Emma did not stop. She said, "Silence never won rights. They are earned by voice." In June 1917, the police entered one of her public meetings in New York and arrested her and Berkman. They were charged with conspiring to obstruct the draft. During the trial, Emma spoke clearly. "If love for humanity and hatred of war is a crime, then I am guilty." She was sentenced to 2 years in prison, but she used her time there wisely, reading, writing, and helping other prisoners learn. Even behind bars, her English lessons continued. She said to one prisoner, "Freedom begins here," and touched her heart. When the war ended in 1918, Emma and Berkman were released. But their freedom was short-lived. The U.S. government had started deporting, sending out of the country, foreign-born activists. Emma Goldman, though she had lived in America for more than 30 years, was still not a citizen. In 1919, she and Berkman were deported to Russia, the land she had left as a young girl. As the ship left New York, Emma stood on deck watching the Statue of Liberty fade into the fog. She whispered, "Liberty. How many crimes are committed in your name?" When Emma arrived in Russia, she thought she had finally reached the land of freedom and equality, the land of the revolution she had always dreamed of. But what she found there broke her heart. The new rulers were not as different as she had hoped. Once again, people were afraid to speak, and for Emma Goldman, silence was the enemy. Chapter 6. The Russian Revolution. Dreams and Disappointment. Was the winter of 1919. Snow covered the sea as Emma Goldman's ship approached the port of Petrograd, now called St. Petersburg. She was 50 years old, tired from prison and exile, but her heart was full of hope. She believed she was returning to a new world, a world built on freedom, equality, and justice. The Russian Revolution had overthrown the Tsar. The workers and peasants had taken power. To Emma, this was the dream of her youth, the dream she and Berkman had risked everything for. When she stepped on Russian soil, she whispered, "At last, I am in the land of the revolution." People greeted her warmly at first. She was famous. Emma Goldman, the American anarchist. Officials and revolutionaries came to meet her. They called her Comrade Emma. But it did not take long for her to see the cracks. In the streets, she saw hunger and fear. Factories were silent. Men with guns watched every corner. Ordinary people whispered before speaking. Emma asked, "Why are people afraid?" And one worker quietly said, "Because words can be dangerous here." It shocked her. This was not the freedom she had imagined. She and Berkman tried to help, offering to work for the revolution's ideals. They visited factories, hospitals, and schools, giving hope where they could. But soon they learned the truth. The new rulers, led by Vladimir Lenin, were crushing all independent voices. The government now controlled everything. The press, the unions, the workers' councils. If anyone disagreed, they were called enemies of the revolution. Prisons were full again. This time, not of Tsar's enemies, but of revolutionaries who dared to question Lenin's rule. Emma met Lenin in person in 1920. She described him as calm, intelligent, but cold, a man who believed that freedom must wait until after victory. She asked him about free speech and political prisoners. Lenin replied, "There can be no free speech in a time of revolution." Emma looked into his eyes and said, "Then the revolution is dead." That was one of the most painful moments of her life. She had believed in a dream, and now saw it, turning into another kind of tyranny, cruel rule. Then came the event that broke her heart completely. The Kronstadt Rebellion of 1921, the sailors of Kronstadt, who had once helped bring the revolution, demanded freedom of speech and fair elections. They said, "We want the revolution of the people, not of the party." But the government, under Lenin and Trotsky, sent the army against them. Thousands of sailors were killed. It was a massacre. Emma cried for days. She later wrote, "Kronstadt was the final blow. It was the end of the Bolshevik dream for me." After that, she and Berkman decided to leave Russia. In 1921, they crossed the border into Latvia, carrying nothing but their books, letters, and broken hearts. Emma said, "I left Russia with a heart full of sorrow, but also with truth. The truth that no revolution is worth it if it kills freedom." Emma Goldman was once again without a home. America had deported her. Russia had disappointed her. But she was not ready to stop. She began to travel across Europe, to England, France, and Spain, speaking, writing, and fighting for the one dream she never gave up, the dream of human freedom. Chapter 7. The Wandering Rebel. Emma Goldman's Final Journey. Emma Goldman had left Russia with tears in her eyes and truth in her heart. She had seen freedom die twice, once in America and once in Russia. But her spirit was still alive. She said softly to herself, "The road is long, but I will keep walking." After leaving Russia in 1921, Emma and Berkman moved from country to country, first to Sweden, then Germany, and later England. Everywhere she went, people came to listen to her speak. Some called her dangerous, others called her brave, but most called her honest. She began writing her autobiography, Living My Life, 2 thick volumes that told the world everything she had seen, felt, and believed. It took her years to write, but she wrote every word with care. It was not just her story. It was the story of courage, love, and freedom itself. Emma had always believed that education was the key to freedom, and now her book became a teacher for thousands. In clear, simple English, she told readers what it meant to live with conscience, inner truth. To live, she wrote, means to feel everything, joy, pain, love, and loss, and still not lose your soul. By the mid-1920s, Emma was in France, then England, giving lectures about art, literature, and freedom of thought. She no longer fought only governments. She spoke against fear, conformity, copying others, and blind obedience. She said in one of her lectures, "The most beautiful thing in life is independence, not of place, but of spirit." But Emma's life was not easy. She was often short of money. She missed her friends in America. And in 1936, her beloved comrade Alexander Berkman took his own life in France after long illness and sadness. When Emma heard the news, she fell silent for a long time. She later wrote, "A part of me died with him, but I will go on, for both of us." Then a new fire rose inside her. That fire came from a country called Spain. In 1936, Spain was in the middle of a civil war, a fight between democracy and dictatorship, one-man rule. Ordinary people, workers and farmers were standing up for their freedom, and when Emma heard about it, her heart awakened again. She said, "Spain is the only place where the people are really trying to live my dream." So, even at the age of 67, she packed her small suitcase and went to Spain. She met young people fighting not for power, but for liberty. She gave speeches, helped hospitals, and encouraged the people not to lose hope. The Spanish fighters loved her. They called her La Madre de los Anarquistas, the mother of the anarchists. She saw in them the courage she had once seen in herself, a courage born from love, not hate. She said to them, "Freedom cannot be given. It must be taken with the heart." But war is cruel, and by 1939, Spain had fallen under dictatorship. Once again, Emma watched a dream disappear. She was heartbroken, but still she refused to stop believing in humanity. She returned to Canada, where she lived quietly in the last years of her life. She continued to write letters, articles, and essays, always teaching one lesson. Freedom is not a thing we get from others. It is something we carry inside. In May 1940, in Toronto, Emma Goldman suffered a stroke. She was 70 years old. A few weeks later, on May 14, 1940, she passed away peacefully. Even in her final days, she had said to her friends, "I may be old in body, but my soul is still young," because it never obeyed. Her body was brought back to the United States, the country that had once deported her. She was buried in Forest Park Cemetery in Chicago, near the graves of the Haymarket martyrs, the very people who had inspired her as a young girl. On her grave, it is written, "Liberty will not descend to a people. Ye people must raise themselves to liberty." And so ended the life of a woman who lived for freedom, Emma Goldman, the woman who never stopped speaking truth. Even today, Emma Goldman's ideas live on, in books, in classrooms, and protests, and in every young person who dares to think freely. Her life teaches us not only English words but also human strength, how to speak clearly, think deeply, and live honestly. She proved that the most powerful sentence in any language is this: I am free. Dear listener, you have just walked through the life of a woman who never stopped believing, Emma Goldman. You saw her as a young girl in Russia, dreaming of freedom. You saw her working in factories, speaking for workers and fighting for justice. You saw her standing in prisons, in courtrooms, and in front of angry crowds, yet never losing her voice. You saw her travel across oceans, from America to Russia, from France to Spain, carrying one message everywhere she went. A free mind is the beginning of a free world. Her life was not easy. She was called dangerous, crazy, unpatriotic, but she never allowed the world to silence her. She stood alone, and she spoke, not for fame, not for money, but for truth. And maybe, dear listener, that is the real meaning of learning any language, not just to speak, but to speak truthfully. Emma Goldman reminds us that English, or any language, is not just words. It is courage, it is expression, it is life itself. So today, when you practice your English, remember her. When you feel shy or afraid to speak, remember her words. Don't be afraid to speak. Every great idea was once a whisper. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes, because every time you use your voice, you continue her story. Emma's life teaches us 3 timeless lessons. Speak clearly, because words have power. Think freely, because no one can control your mind. Live bravely, because courage is the most beautiful language in the world. She may be gone, but her fire still burns, in every classroom, in every protest, and now in you. So take a deep breath. Speak your next English sentence with pride, because when you speak, you keep freedom alive.